Welcome to the Mac Power Users. I'm David Sparks and joined as always by my friend and yours, Stephen Hackett. Hello, Stephen.
Hey, David. How are you?
Good. I am looking forward to today's show. We're going to be hitting some feedback. There's a lot going on, new M4 Macs and a bunch of other stuff to discuss. Can hardly wait to get started.
Yeah, a lot of stuff today. And on More Power Users, which is the ad-free, longer version of the show that we do each and every single week, we're going to talk about your new cable management strategy. You've gone down a rabbit hole, and I think I'm probably going to follow you down it, but I want to get a status update on how that's going.
Yes.
That'll be at the end of the show for our members.
I think, Stephen, you will follow me. I think it's inevitable.
I think it is too.
We're gonna have to talk about that. But before we do anything, let's talk about those new Macs that have been shipping for the last few weeks. So to summarize, M4 has arrived. We got it on the iPad, but now it's on the Mac. There is an M4 iMac, still with its same size screen. We didn't get the big iMac.
Mm-hmm.
There is an M4 and an M4 Pro MacBook Pro, and there is an M4 Mac Mini. And the Mac Mini, we just have to stop and acknowledge, got a new design. And man, is it cute.
It's really, really cool. I mean, I think out of all of these, the Mac Mini is the exciting one because it's only the third form factor in the 20-year run of the Mac Mini. You had the original one, and then you had in 2010, they switched to the unibody. That first unibody Mac Mini still had an optical drive, and that was the design that they just retired, just a couple of weeks ago. And especially in the Apple Silicon era, it just didn't need to be that big. This is not Apple shrinking something just because they could. Like this computer is better for being smaller, and they're not compromising anything. Like they still have the M4 Pro in there, which is an incredibly powerful system on a chip.
Yeah, I mean it was spacious inside the old one.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of room in there. So, do you ever hear the story about Steve Jobs taking, like when they were designing the iPod, they would bring him a prototype and he'd throw it into a fish tank, and if it bubbled, he'd tell him to go work on it more.
Yeah.
Have you heard this story? Yeah,
I don't know
if that's true or not.
Come on.
Yeah, but I mean, if you had thrown the prior generation Mac Mini into a fishbowl, there'd be a lot of bubbles.
It may have floated, honestly. It was a lot of air in there.
Yeah. But I mean, they did, on the design of that, let's just talk about that for a minute. So they did a couple things interesting. They put two USB-C ports on the front of it, which I think is absolutely the right call. As a Mac Studio owner,
yes,
I find those two ports just so useful. I'm always plugging into them, but not always plugged into them, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little less excited about the idea of putting the headphone cable or jack in the front.
Yeah.
I understand why they did it. It makes sense, like if you wanted to occasionally plug headphones in. But, the speaker, I don't even think does this have a speaker in it? I know the Mac Studio, it has a pathetic speaker in it, and I'm guessing it's even worse probably in the Mac Mini. So you want to plug this in on your desk to external speakers. I think just about anybody who buys one of these is probably going to do that. And now you're going to have to stick it out the front of the device. I don't get that decision.
Yeah, it's a bit odd. I think, maybe their thought is, people are just going to have headphones. And if you have a studio display, you have speakers built in. But it's a little weird. I think if you are going to have this wired to audio all the time, you can get a little headphone extension with like a 90-degree jack on it so that you can kind of like snake the cable around. It's a little weird.
You're still looking at it.
Yeah, you're still looking at it. And if you mount it under your desk, like when I had a Mac Studio, I had it mounted in this 3D printed thing under the desk. Then you have to kind of contend with that. And like, is it sticking out? It's a little unusual, but I think it's, at the end of the day, like I think this design is really awesome. I went to the Apple Store yesterday to see it, in advance of recording today. And it looks like a Mac Studio that just got left in the dryer too long. Like it's a Mac Studio, but it's closer to the Apple, way, way closer to the Apple TV in size. In fact, this makes the Mac Studio look gargantuan next to it. It's really, the pictures really don't do it justice. Like if you have an Apple store nearby, like, next time you're in the mall, go stick your head in there because they really drastically changed the way this product looks.
I'm not upgrading. I don't need one. I've got a great M2 Mac Studio. I tell you, when it comes time to upgrade, I could see myself using a Mac Mini. The thing that puts the brakes on it for me is probably the I/O, because I use all the ports on the Mac Studio, and this has fewer ports.
Yeah, I think people like you would need some sort of Thunderbolt dock, like the CalDigit or OWC just has, they got a bunch. I think they've announced Thunderbolt 5 ones if you have a MacBook Pro. I think that's probably where a lot of like more power user people will be. They're going to need some sort of dock. But I think for most, like the Mac Mini is so interesting. Jason Snell came up with this term years ago, and it's so smart that the Mac Mini is the escape valve, the escape hatch for the Mac line, because
for the Apple ecosystem.
Yeah, because you can just do anything with it, right? And some people are just going to have it in an office just as like a basic, sort of office machine, or at home as a shared family computer. I've got a Mac Mini under my television. I have a base M1 Mac Mini, and I've got a Thunderbolt dock attached to it because I got a bunch of SSDs hanging off the back of it for various reasons.
Yeah.
But, this thing is flexible. Like if you need a dock, it's not that big of a deal because it's a desktop computer. You can just stash a dock somewhere on or under your desk. But for people who are just going to use it out of the box with a studio display or something, I'm sure it'll be fine. And I think it's really interesting that they spent the time and the effort to do this on a machine that, in the grand scheme of things, right, something like 3 out of every 4 Macs sold are notebooks. So 1 out of 4 is split between the Mac Pro, the Mac Studio, the iMac, and the Mac Mini. I don't know what the makeup is in there, but anytime any of those machines get attention, I think it's a good day as a fan of desktop Macs.
Yeah. And I continue to get emails from people saying, well, when are they going to bring back the big iMac? And it feels to me like this Mac Mini is the answer to that question.
Yeah.
Never. They want you to buy a little tiny puck and a separate screen and then run them independently, which honestly, you could. I know you would hate this, Stephen, but you could easily Velcro this to the back of a screen.
It's true.
And you've got your iMac. It's so cute and little. And there are some benefits to it. Snazzy Labs has a great video where they did the teardown, and it is not as integrated as we expected, which is good, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because the Mac Studio is the same way, where the storage is actually a separate component inside the machine. Now, there's a bunch of caveats with that. It's not like on a PC where you can just like go buy a an M.2 SSD from Best Buy and plug it in. The controller and a lot of the logic is on the system on a chip, and the Mac Studio is basically the same way. There have been efforts, particular by one person who goes online. Their handle is DOS Dude. Have done a lot of work around getting storage components onto the market where you could upgrade this yourself. But this is not a drop in, buy a new SSD and put it in kind of situation. But the door is open a little bit. So that's super interesting. And the other thing I'll say about the SSD while we're on topic with this is we got some emails about this and some feedback about this, because some of the M2 and M3 Macs, the base SSD option actually ran slower. On modern Macs, most of the time, the SSDs are actually 2 different drives, and they put them together in software and in firmware. You don't ever have to think about that. But the benefit is it's faster. And on these low-end Macs, Apple for a couple of years now has just had one storage device, and so it runs at slower speeds. And so, for instance, the 256 gig, MacBook Air may run at X speed, and the 512, the storage would be twice as fast. They have remedied this in the M4 lineup, and including on the Mac Mini. In fact, on his teardown, Quinn's teardown, the link is in the show notes. He shows it like, oh, the 256 module is actually two 128 gig modules kind of glued together. And so if you get the base storage, it'll be nice and fast, which is great. That was a kind of a dumb limitation of cheap Macs, and I'm glad they fixed that.
Yeah. I got an email from a Lazimber who has he said, if I get the 256, I'll be at 80% capacity. You think that's okay? And my answer was no. Like, you want this computer to last you a long time. If you're already at 80% capacity,
yeah,
you've got to upgrade. And I know it's ridiculous how much Apple charges for those increases. Trust me, I know. But you really should future-proof the device, because what's going to happen if you get it on the edge of not enough space is that you're going to end up buying a new one a lot sooner than you would otherwise. It's not like the old days where you just crack it open and, throw a new hard drive in. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Even these where it's kind of addressable, it's like, if you get it in, how do you get the system to recognize it? It just feels to me like the whole thing is pretty iffy that you're going to be able to user swappable storage.
I would not buy one of these with that in mind down the road. I think even if it becomes feasible, like tearing this thing apart is beyond the skill of a lot of people, and I think plan ahead. You said something I want to circle back to, or like you as a Mac Studio user, like kind of eyeing this, because the M4 Pro is really good. And like, if you go read the reviews on 6colors, it really seems like this time around, the Pro chip is the sweet spot. The Max is there if you need a lot more GPU cores, or in some products, getting the Max unlocks other things like additional RAM or storage. But that M4 Pro is faster than the M1 Max. And I think I don't have the numbers in front of me, basically on par or faster than the M1 Ultra. Like, someone like you, David, like, yeah, you'd probably need a dock, but you may be able to get away with this. Now, what are you running now? What is your Mac Studio configuration?
It's an M2 with M2 Max configuration with 32 gigabytes of RAM. But just to be clear, this thing screams. Yeah. I mean, I have zero interest in updating. I was thinking about it. I think the next time I'll even consider upgrade is when they get to an M6 Studio.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're following suit, they're not going to upgrade the Studio with each iteration, which is fine by me. But, when it gets to M6, I'll look at it. And frankly, even then, I'll look at the whole question. Like, do I need a Studio? Could I get by with a Mini? Do I want to do the Stephen Hackett thing, where I just get a laptop? Where I have no idea. But what I can say is I'm very happy with my M2 Studio, and I think I'm good for quite a while now.
Yeah, and that's the story of Apple Silicon, right? That most people, like the M1 and M2, are still just banger machines. And yes, they're and this was true with the Intel days. There are always people at the highest end who are going to upgrade more often because they really are pushing these machines. And there are still workflows and people who, they need the Max and are waiting for the Ultra and those sorts of users. But for most of us, the new thing is not necessary. I know there was a bit of a hubbub. There has been for several years. Like, why does Apple compare these machines to Intel machines in their keynotes? Like, aren't they kind of punching down? Like, oh, the new MacBook Air is 6 times faster than the last Intel MacBook Air. Well, they do that because there's still a bajillion Intel Macs out there. And I think Apple knows that for a while, the upgrade cycle on Apple Silicon is not going to be from people who already have Apple Silicon machines. It's going to be people who are still using Intel machines. In fact, I spoke to somebody just today, a friend of mine. I didn't know this. I would have intervened a long time ago. He's on a 2015 MacBook Pro. He's like, I'm thinking it's time. Like, yeah, dude. Like, the 2015 MacBook Pro was a really good machine. Really, really good. It was before the Thunderbolt, touch bar weirdness. It's like, dude, go get like the base 14-inch MacBook Pro, because he wants HDMI and a couple things that the Air doesn't have. I was like, the base M4 MacBook Pro will smoke it. The performance difference between your machine and a new one is not even funny. Like,
yeah.
And that's who Apple's selling these to now. It's not, I don't think there's many people trading in an M1 iMac for an M4 iMac. You know what I mean?
They're great machines, and they're hopefully going to last a long time. And anytime you buy, it's going to be a little better. And it's impressive, the performance improvements you see in the M4 over prior iterations of the Apple Silicon. I feel like M4 is a good jump year instance. Like it could make sense to upgrade an M1 or an M2 if depending on the work you do. But for me, it's not necessary. And I'm not even sure it'll be necessary when they get to M6 because, I do a lot of video production, but this thing rips through it. I mean, I don't know. I think if I had to think about it, the one issue I feel like I probably made a mistake on this is I only got 32 gigabytes of RAM or memory, as Apple calls it. I have to learn that. But I do think in the future, as AI becomes more important and on-chip AI becomes more important, more RAM is going to be a definite improvement. But yeah, I don't think I'm going to be that interested in a new Mac for quite a while. One thing on the Mac Mini before we leave, though, because I just have to mention this. Another Labs member sent me this link. It's the cutest 3D print I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
It turns your Mac Mini into a Mac Mini Pro. You want to describe it, Stephen?
Yeah, so this is put together by Jared, who I think is a listener. We chatted on Mastodon for a while about this. I linked to it on 512 Pixels, and he sent me a note. So you 3D print this thing, and you slot your M4 Mac Mini into it, and it makes it look like the cheese grater. It makes it look like the current Mac Pro. And there's even an option for wheels, or you can do feet. It's adorable, and a friend of mine locally is actually going to be upgrading to one of these new Mac Minis. He's been holding out for a new Mac Mini, and I sent him this link, and I was like, "If you want this, I will print it for you so fast. Like, I will make this for you if you want it." It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love what people are doing with the 3D models in these tiny Macs. There's some good Mac Mini ones as well, and I'm sure we'll see even more. I mean, can you imagine like Federico's thing where he's got a laptop / Mac / iPad? I feel like this small form factor opens up options for things like that too.
Definitely.
Yeah, going to be fun. Real quick on the M4 MacBook Pro, we haven't talked about it much, but it's generally the same design, right? I mean, it's just faster chips inside.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. There's also been some clamoring, people like, oh, when are they going to redesign the MacBook Pro? It's like, y'all, it's been 3 years, like settle down. And I think the MacBook Pro, someone who has used a 14-inch for 2 years as his main Mac, the MacBook Pro design is excellent. Like the port selection is really good. I do not care about the thickness and weight in this machine. It's like we were all clamoring for Apple to make thicker machines with better battery life in the Intel days. They did it, and now you want the opposite? Like settle down. Like they're really good, and the screens are incredible, and you get lots of I/O, and yeah, the MacBook Pro is in a really good place, and it really feels like I was just kind of thinking about like what would I have them change on the MacBook Pro, and it's really hard to come up with a list beyond add Face ID. Like after I get to that, I'm like, honestly, I think the design totally works, and I think they're going to keep it for a long time. But yeah, it's a generational update. It's not a big change. The big change this time was the Mac Mini, 100%.
And I want to call out Apple on something because we're good at calling out Apple for being cheap sometimes, about not putting enough memory in, or 5 gigabytes of free storage. But occasionally they do the right thing, and they did it this year. At the time these were released, simultaneously they announced that the M3 MacBook Air now ships with a minimum of 16 gigabytes of memory. And previously, if you'd bought it a few weeks ago, it would have been 8 gigabytes. In fact, when my daughter bought a new MacBook Air last month, I told her to upgrade specifically for memory, just getting back to that AI thing I was talking about earlier. And Apple's aware of it too. So now if you buy an M3, the price didn't go up, but it does have more memory.
Well, even better than that, you can actually still buy a new M2 MacBook Air. That's the one at $999, and the M3 is $1099. The M2 also got updated to 16 gigabytes of unified memory, which is awesome. They didn't have to go back and do that. And again, the price stayed the same. Now, Walmart has been selling like a $700 version of the M1 MacBook Air. That still has 8 gigs. That's kind of a different market. But anything you get from Apple now is 16 gigabytes of memory. Long past time, but I think Apple Silicon, I think Apple Intelligence finally kind of pushed this over the edge for them, which is great. Like for $999 or $1099, you can get an excellent MacBook Air, and now you don't have to upgrade the RAM.
Yeah, and I can see a world where they didn't do that, where they just left it as is, and I appreciate that they did the right thing with the memory on the prior generations. So that's cool. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by 1Password. Head over to 1password.com/MPU right now to get 20% off. With 1Password, you get both productivity and security. It's so easy to think that those two things are mutually exclusive, but that's not true. 1Password allows you to securely store data, passwords, and more, and remain productive on your computer. It takes all of the speed blocks out of the way to secure computing. You don't have to choose between security and convenience. You can manage all of your information and credentials in one place. And if you've got family members, you can keep them safe as well with a family plan. You can also protect them online with an easy-to-use security solution. Because it just uses 1Password, you always know your password, even when you don't. 1Password makes it easy to create, manage, and use strong passwords that lock down your life's most valuable essentials. And when you create new ones, you can make them unique passwords. There are a bunch of different protocols you can use, so you can decide what you want, whether it's just a random string or a memorable phrase. All of that is possible with 1Password. And I think my favorite feature is Watchtower, where it monitors your passwords to give you your password health, but also takes a look at the companies that you deal with your passwords to make sure that they're on top of their game as well. If they have a problem, you wouldn't know, except 1Password does let you know. They even search the dark web for a list of passwords to compare it against yours to see if you have any exposed passwords. Whether for yourself, your family, your company, or your enterprise, 1Password has a solution for you. It's a company that truly has all types of consumers in mind and excellent software. Both Stephen and I have been using it since they started. So to get that 20% off, go to 1password.com/MPU and sign up today. Let them know you heard about it at the Mac Power Users. And by the way, as the holidays approach, why don't you help out some of your family members and get them hooked up with 1Password? You can get them that 20% off and make sure they are also safe and secure on the internet. Thanks 1Password for all of your support of the Mac Power Users.
Okay, let's move into some listener feedback, and we start with the topic of RSS, which is always fun. Listener Matt wrote in any case to avoid spending too much time doom scrolling, I've been trying to read more via RSS feeds in the excellent Unread app. Unread app is great. Just came to the Mac in the last couple months, which is cool.
Yeah.
I'm curious what RSS feeds you guys are following and kind of what your general setup is. So what are you using?
Unread.
Nice.
Yeah, we talked about it when we did the RSS show, and I always go back and forth between Reader and Unread.
Yeah.
Reader did an update. It just didn't really, didn't work for me.
Yeah, and, I got some feelings on that in a second.
Okay, well, we'll let you talk about that. But I've always loved Unread for what I call a combination of beauty and friction. Historically, I used RSS apps that made it really easy to save articles to read it later services and whatnot. And it became like that was the game I played. Like I didn't read anything. I just put everything into read it later services. And then, of course, I never actually read it later. So I just built a huge collection of articles I never read. Mm-hmm. So Unread, it makes it so pretty to read in the app that I read a lot in the app. And if I want to save it to later, there's just a couple extra button pushes but that's just enough friction to make me really think twice before I put it in. And now my Read It Later service has a lot more articles I actually want to read. So
Sure.
I am like listener Matt. I am in with Unread.
Yeah. What are you using on the back end? Are you using Feedbin or Feedly, or what's going on there?
Good question. I set it up so long ago, I forgot. I think Feedbin. Okay. I think it was Feedbin. I set it up, but yeah, because for a while I tried it with Reader. They had an internal service.
Yeah,
but no, I think Feedbin is my back end now.
Yeah, that's what I use. Feedbin has this great trick where you can pipe in email newsletters, because you get like remember back in the day, like the send to Evernote email address you would get, and you could like forward an email in. It's great. More apps should have email things to me. But that's basically what Feedbin does. You get a custom thing, and then you plug that into, whatever newsletter form field you want. So I've been using Feedbin for a long time, and yeah, it's great.
I want to hear your thoughts on Reader, but also just to look at this, what is the other end of this? What is your Read It Later service these days?
I'm using GoodLinks. So I flirted with Readwise Reader. Is that what they call it? It's got some goofy name.
Very powerful.
It is very powerful. It was a bit much for what I needed. So I kind of went back to GoodLinks, and I've been happy with it. And GoodLinks has this great update where you can highlight in articles and it stays synced, which is really cool. So yeah, GoodLinks is still my Read It Later.
I am like Readwise Reader is good. I am flirting with GoodLinks because so many of my friends like it, and it is really nice. So I don't really have a final decision there.
Yeah.
But right now I'm using GoodLinks, and I would agree that it is a very nice app.
Yeah, it's great. So I'm using Feedbin, and I'm using Reader Classic. And so what has happened here is the developer launched a new version of Reader that is really like very different. It is not a traditional like RSS client where you plug in your credentials to Feedbin or something, or use iCloud. It's really, really different. And you can add RSS feeds directly, but again, it doesn't sync with anything. It just has its own iCloud thing. No external services, which is about a deal breaker for me. But it also lets you pull in podcasts or Mastodon or like other social media accounts or subreddits or YouTube channels. Like it is one of these apps that's trying to become like a universal inbox where you don't have to go around to a bunch of different places. And I think that's interesting, but it's just not for me. I would rather use a good dedicated podcast client. I would rather use a good dedicated Mastodon client. I would rather use the YouTube iOS app than like have all of that very different types of media all in one place. But the old Reader is still around, called Reader Classic, and the developer says it's not going anywhere. So that is that's what I'm using. I've used it for years and use it across iOS, iPadOS, and the Mac.
Nice. Matt continues. I'm curious what RSS feeds you guys are following now, especially those that are new since 2020. You got any suggestions?
Yeah, three came to mind. Two of them are new. One of them is newer to me. The first one is Platformer, written by Casey Newton. It's a paid newsletter. It was on Substack. Now he moved to Ghost, but it really covers like the intersection of like social media and like culture, or social media and politics. Casey's really well sourced, a great writer. Platformer is awesome. And the second one is 404 Media, which is a new kind of in-depth coverage of tech. So right now they're running a series on like flock cameras, which are these cameras that you see in a lot of cities that like scan license plates, and they're talking about the privacy and security implications of that sort of thing. 404 Media, free version and a paid version. I pay for it. I think it's great. Really good, smart team over there. And then third one that I really enjoy, that's Ernie's been writing this for a long time, but I started reading it the last few years, is Tedium. And Ernie writes these like really in-depth, long-form essays once or twice a week about something in the technology world, and it's really great. And I think he does a good job and has a lot of interesting ideas on things. So those are three that are relatively new to me that I've enjoyed.
I am going to check these out. Thanks for sharing. I have done something a little different. About a year or two ago, I realized I spent too much time in the Apple News app, and while I'm not susceptible so much to social media distraction, I think news distraction is easy for me. The algorithm figures out just to feed me enough to get me wound up to keep me there. So I decided I wanted to do a list of that, and I put my money where my mouth is. I decided to subscribe to a few people who are publishing kind of curated newsletters. So I have spent some money, and I'm supporting several writers now. MG Siegler, I'm sorry, has one called Spyglass, which is really good on Apple stuff. He does that separately at his website. And then I subscribe to several people in Substack, and some of them I pay for. Austin Kleon is one of my favorites. It's just great. Everything he writes, I read. Matthew Crawford, who's the Shopcraft, Soulcraft guy, he has one. I like some of the stuff he does. Some of the other stuff I don't read. Ethan Mollick, who's one of the big writers on AI, he wrote the book Co-Intelligence.
Yeah.
And I also subscribe to his Substack, and I always read everything he writes. And Christopher Schwartz is a woodworker that I like, and he has one called American Peasant, which is about woodworking, but it's also about life and really good. So I actually find myself now, when I am tempted to go to the news app, I go to Substack.
Yeah.
And I catch up with my feeds, and and I also follow some philosophy stuff too, but Massimo Pugliucci is a good one. But you guys don't want to hear me talk about that stuff. But I do like reading it. I find it enriching, and it makes me feel better than reading the news. So there you go.
And you're reading those in the Substack app?
Well, I do a couple things. I do read that. I try to train myself to not push the news button and push the Substack button.
Yeah.
And that's just a good way to do it. But you can have it also email them to you. One thing I would like in Good Links is the ability to have a magic email and just feed them straight into Good Links. Maybe I could do that with Feedbin. I don't think so, because these aren't Feedbin type subscriptions.
So you can do it with Substacks, but you basically have to change your Substack email address to your send to Feedbin address, which gets weird, because then if you need to like update your credit card, the payment failed email comes through Feedbin to your RSS reader. Like, you kind of got to get used to some weirdness with that.
Yeah, that's not really good.
No, it's less than ideal.
Yeah. And like I like MG Siegler's because it's his own thing, and you can send it directly, But either way, that's a problem I need to probably solve at some point. But either way, it's fine. I read them in Substack. When I get the emails, I know that something new is there that I may want to read. Sure. I don't ideally like to read them in email. In fact, you can click on the link view to look at it in Safari, and then you're one click away from putting it in Good Links or Readwise or wherever. So maybe there's a better workflow for this. I probably need to sort it out. But my point is, I have been getting new feeds, but I've been paying for them, and it's been a really nice change for me.
I think Substacks and these sorts of things like Platformer and TDM, like they're obviously it's the new sort of form factor and business model, but it's kind of what was really good about blogging, 15 or 20 years ago, like when you and I got started. It's like somebody who has a pretty limited scope in what they write about, but are really, really good at it. Like that AI one you mentioned, I've come across his writing before. It's like, oh yeah, like this is somebody who is a trusted voice in this area and is doing really good work. And part of that is selecting a scope and being really focused on something. Same with Casey at Platformer. So I think this sort of thing is really interesting. And a lot of it really, I think he deserves more credit than he gets for it. But Ben Thompson with Stratechery, 10 years ago was kind of putting these things together. It was like, it's a newsletter, but it's also a website. And like, it kind of doesn't really matter how you read it. The content's kind of in both places.
Yeah.
And, I think Ben deserves a lot of credit for that. And the only reason I didn't mention Ben is because I've read Stratechery since day one. Like when it was announced, people I like were like, hey, this is really good. And I've paid for it basically ever since. I think Ben is one of the smartest people in our industry.
Yeah, agreed.
So let's talk a little bit about some app updates. So we've got some feedback and just some news about some apps that we've covered on recent episodes. And the first is Arc, the browser. We talked about Arc a while back. I used Arc for all my work with Underscore for like 3 months in kind of around that episode. And the news, I don't know how to take this. David Pierce over at The Verge wrote this. The browser company, which is the company that is behind the browser Arc, a very good literal company name, they are working on a new product, and it's not Arc 2.0, even though that is coming, but it's a new browser with some like new ideas in it. And basically part of the story is Josh Miller, the CEO of the browser company. He's kind of like, yeah, Arc, while it's popular and it's grown really quickly, it's a bit too complicated and a bit too strange to be really mainstream. And we talked about that on that episode. We're like, you don't really have tabs. They're like, your tabs and bookmarks are kind of the same thing. And you're using Command T, kind of like a launcher, like an Obsidian or a Notion. A lot of weird ideas in there. Interesting ideas, but ideas like, I think most people want their browsers to kind of work the way that Safari and Chrome and Firefox work. And Arc is just too far afield of that. And so they're working on something new, it's kind of unknown what that means about the future of Arc, but you can see a world where like, if this new thing takes off, Arc, may kind of fade. I just don't know, but it's interesting that they've come out and said, hey, we're working on something new before really having anything to show for it.
And they say, we're not giving up on Arc, but we're doing this other thing. But, there's only so much focus, right?
Yeah.
Well, I do think that our relationship with the web is undergoing a transformation. Another product that shipped since the last time we talked about this is that ChatGPT now has their own form of perplexity, like they do search now. At least if you have a paid account, and I'm sure very shortly it'll be true for everyone, where it goes and searches the web and summarizes them for you. Historically, you do a web search, it gives you a list of links, you go read the links, you get your answer. The idea of this new model is that you ask a question, it gets the links, it reads the links, it gives you the answer. So it streamlines that process for you. But that changes things for guys like you and me that make little blogs. People, these engines will go find the answer from our blog and give it to the user. They'll never have actually seen our page. And there's all sorts of things up in the air now. And I wouldn't be surprised if the ideal browser changes as well as part of that process.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. I think that there's a lot of these companies, Arc and say what you will, OpenAI, but like they're trying stuff. And it feels like this kind of new wave of software companies are really okay with like, hey, the thing we tried didn't work out, so we're going to pivot or we're going to change. And I don't know, it's really interesting.
Yeah. Hazel got a new version.
Yeah.
Kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Version 6.
Hazel 6. Hazel is just a long-term favorite around here of us and our listeners. And Hazel 6 has a bunch of great stuff. I think my favorite thing is it will on demand OCR a file for sorting, because not every PDF or file we have has OCR data in it. I guess this is mostly PDF since it's OCR. And like, well, what can I do about that? And maybe you have like a separate OCR app, or try to resave it in something and then let it. But now it can just do it on the fly, and it doesn't change the file. So this OCR information is created. Hazel uses it and then it's not saved back to the original file, which I can see why that decision was made. I think it would be nice if there was an option in Hazel to be like, no, actually, I would like you to OCR this and then attach that OCR information to the file. I get why they didn't do it. Just, just kind of my personal feelings. But I think that's a great addition.
Yeah. And this is really a power user update because these are the issues that power users have had with Hazel historically. Like the basics of, file name recognition and filing and putting your files where they belong. It's been good at that for decades,
Yeah.
But but getting like specific information out of a file to rename it, that's always a bit hit and miss. And I feel like this version is really aimed at that. I'm playing with the new version. I have a Hazel field guide. I'm going to do an update at some point. I'm not going to promise when, and I don't know if it means I have to redo the whole guide or if I can just do a free update of just the new features. I don't know, but people are asking me about it, and I'm just going to say yes, it's on my radar, but I'm not sure exactly what it means yet. But either way, if you're a Hazel user, you should definitely check out this update.
Yeah, and it's $20 if you're upgrading from a previous version. And $42 new. So yeah, this is one of those, like, I saw the blog post and I updated it because Hazel is it's one of those things, like if it somehow stops working in the background, it's like, why is my computer not doing things? Like, what is happening?
Yeah. And it's such a great developer story. It's a single developer. Paul's a really nice guy, and he makes his living making Hazel, and he just spends all his time trying to make it better. So you're really supporting the kind of software developers we love around here.
Yeah. If you looked at the show notes last week in our holiday gift guide, you noticed I added this. Between the time we recorded and the time we published that episode, it was announced that Tidbit, which is the device I talked about, like a kind of a pixely screen you can put in your office and put little apps on it, that it has been purchased. It was acquired by Modal, which I've looked at Modal's website for like 15 minutes, and I'm still not sure what they do. They say it's serverless cloud infrastructure for AI, machine learning, and data applications. I don't know what that means. AI stuff in the cloud.
Yeah.
And they are basically, because the co-founders of Tidbit came from Spotify, and they basically are hiring them for their expertise. And I am quoting from the blog post: "The service will remain running for everyone with existing devices, but no new devices will be shipped." So my Tidbit is still working. Check back in a year. I just don't know. The other blog post on the Tidbit site says they shipped over 100,000 devices, but no more are coming out. Unclear what the future of this thing is, but I think it's the fastest I've ever put something on the holiday gift guide and then it gets acquired or shut down. It's kind of a bummer.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the future is. It's very unclear for that one. Yeah. Here's a weird one. Apple bought Pixelmator.
Yeah. What?
Apple has such a strange relationship with pro apps, right? Because a lot of the pro apps they've sold over the years were the result of an acquisition.
Yeah. They bought Logic from eMagic.
Yeah. And Final Cut too, wasn't that the result of an acquisition? I don't remember what the original app's name was.
It was like getting ready to launch and they bought it at the last minute. The Final Cut history is really interesting.
Yeah. But then some of them they get excited about, and some of them kind of just go away after years. Remember, Aperture was kind of like the pro level photo management app and editor that they had for a long time. And then one day they just went away, and now they're taking in Pixelmator. I don't know how to feel about it. I kind of like that Apple is acquiring some of these pro app assets with the idea that the Apple internal productivity suite and Apple apps are going to improve. It's kind of been a theme we've been talking about on this show now for a few years. So I could see this being a part of that. Is this going to be incorporated into the Photos app? Is it going to be a more of a pro level photo app? Or are they going to just let it go away and put this team on something else? I don't really know.
Yeah, I think something like Photomator, some of those tools, I think that stuff kind of just gets integrated into the Apple Photos ecosystem. But obviously, Pixelmator is a much more interesting question. And those features don't belong in Photos, right? And
Yeah.
Apple doesn't really, they don't have an image editor. Like Preview has some really basic stuff in it. But if you look at sort of the categories of pro software out there, this is a missing one in Apple's portfolio. So I don't know what it means. If I had to guess, I would say that something Pixelmator turns into something that Apple sells, and when that happens, I don't know. The blog post is like nothing's changing for now, so unknown. But I don't think you buy this and like break apart Pixelmator and like stuff pieces of it all over the place. Like Apple, a good photo editor, a good image editor, is something Apple should have. And so I suspect Pixelmator will basically come out the other side of this still intact, while Photomator probably won't.
Yeah. I think so too. And like a Photoshop alternative, but it won't be Photoshop. And that's what Pixelmator always was. In fact, I'm a very avid user of Pixelmator. I'll be sad if it goes away and they don't, come up with something new. But but I think that's probably the future as well. I don't think it's like just hiring these people. I think they really want to have a second level photo editor. And the other thing I know about Pixelmator is they were always early to the game with AI type photo management stuff. Like one of the tricks Pixelmator does is resolution increases with smoothing, which is really well done. So like I have a bunch of wallpapers that were old wallpapers that, were very low resolution, but they're simple enough that I could run them through Pixelmator and turn them into something I can use on my giant screen.
Yeah.
And I think that's stuff that Apple would like to have in house.
Yeah, I do too. And I think they would like to have something like if they can, I don't know exactly what this would look like, but if they can integrate it with, things like iWork, right? Like I can double click an image and it opens in Pixelmator and the edits, get saved and automatically come back to my document. Like if they can do some of that sort of round trip stuff, I think that'll be really nice.
Another bit of app news. We talk about Fantastical plenty around here. In fact, we had Michael Simmons on the show a year or two ago. Now they've got a Windows app. Congratulations, Fantastical.
Yeah, yeah. So if you are cross-platform, and I don't think there's any like amazing calendar apps on Windows. I think most people are just stuck with Outlook. This is going to be sweet for those folks who like are Apple at home and maybe they're stuck with a PC at work.
I was thinking with Apple buying Pixelmator, are there any other apps like pro level apps that you'd like to see them buy and incorporate into their suite of applications?
The only thing that came to mind for me, and it's a bit of a weird one, but something like Strava. I think the fitness sharing that Apple has, right, where you can like get notifications when your friends finish a workout, you can see their rings, like it's nice. And I do that with some people, but it could be a lot more full featured. And Strava shows more information and it does things like you can upload photos of your bike ride or what the weather was like on your run. And to be clear, they don't need to buy Strava to do that. Like they could just add those things. But it just came to mind for me, like if you're in the Apple fitness ecosystem, one of the things that's kind of weak is that sort of social aspect of it. And for a lot of people, that's important. Like I got people I bike ride with, like if their Strava fails, it's like, the bike ride didn't happen. Like they value that. And it does this great thing too, where on bike rides and walks and runs, it has segments. So like there's this segment in my neighborhood that's basically it's a 1 mile stretch and it's got a pretty good grade on it. I forget what the segment is called, but you can go in there and like see your time over history of like, I've ridden this segment 10 times and these are my different times. Who's the fastest of my friends at it? Who's the fastest of all time? And I think people care about that stuff. I think it's interesting. I think it would be really interesting for Apple to adopt some of that stuff in their fitness sharing world.
Yeah. For me, the one that stands out to me that needs more pro level features is the native calendar app. I feel like they've done good with reminders and notes, but calendar is just still kind of sitting there. There's a lot of features in apps like Fantastical and BusyCal that they just don't have in Apple Calendar app, and maybe that's a conscious choice. But I'd like to see them. I don't know if it's an acquisition or double down or something, but I'd like to see them try to put some money or assets into calendar to make it better.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that I think a lot of calendars have, like they have weather built into it. It's like Apple, you have a weather service. It's just right there. Like, those sort of things I think would be great. This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. With Squarespace, it doesn't matter if you're starting out or managing a growing brand. You can build a beautiful website, engage with your audience, and sell anything, products, services, and even content. Because Squarespace has everything you need all in one place and all on your terms. With Squarespace, you can make the most of design intelligence. It combines 2 decades of industry-leading design expertise with cutting-edge AI technology to unlock your strongest creative potential. Squarespace's design intelligence empowers anyone to build a beautiful, personalized website tailored to their unique needs and craft a bespoke digital identity to use across one's entire online presence. And you can get discovered quickly with integrated SEO tools because every website built with Squarespace is optimized to be indexed with meta descriptions and auto-generated sitemaps. So that means you're going to show up more often to more people in global search engine results. And keep track of that traffic with analytics. It's all built into Squarespace. You can measure your end-to-end online performance with their powerful website analytics. Get insights on top traffic sources, understand how your reach is growing, track sales metrics, and learn where to focus new engagement. It's all the data you need to scale your brand or business, and it's fully integrated and clearly displayed. And fully integrated and clearly displayed, that's what I love about Squarespace. All of these tools and so many more all work together. They know about each other, so you can move fluidly between the different components you need to run your online business. So head on over to squarespace.com and sign up for a free trial today. When you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/MPU, and there you will save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain name. That's squarespace.com/MPU when you decide to sign up, and you'll get 10% off your first purchase and show your support for the show. Our thanks to Squarespace for their support of MPU and all of Relay.
More listener feedback. Josh wrote in wanting us to talk about screen sharing on Apple Silicon Macs. What's the story with screen sharing in Apple Silicon Macs?
Yeah, so it's a super interesting topic, and I think it's kind of been in the news because the betas of Vision OS, you can do like a widescreen virtual Mac desktop. But with Apple Silicon, if you have an Apple Silicon Mac on both ends, so I'm on my MacBook Pro and I'm hitting my M1 Mac Mini that I mentioned earlier, you can set up a virtual display and you have some options with that. And that gives you a lot of flexibility. And it also means that you're kind of unlocked from like whatever that Mac is actually plugged into. Like I'm sure you remember, David, I'm sure a lot of our listeners do too. Back in the day, if you were running a headless Mac Mini, you get like a little 1080p dongle and plug it in because other than that, it was like 720p. And when you did a screen sharing session into it, it was really small. Like this gets rid of all of that. And there's a bunch of options where you have scaling on and off. You can show full quality. You can also do adapt quality to network conditions. So if you're remoting in like really far away and it's slow, it's like, well, let me trade off some quality for speed, which is really cool. And it's really come a long way. And in this, there are a couple of really interesting things. The first one is clipboard sharing. This is not just with Apple Silicon Macs, but something I find really useful. If you're remoting into a Mac, you need to get a file over to it. You can also drag and drop files and it'll copy them. But like if you don't have your password manager on the remote Mac and you need a password, like copy it on your local machine, paste it over there. It's extremely useful. But what's really cool, and as we're recording this, he hasn't done it, but Jason Snell promises me that he will write a blog post about this because this comes from him. But I also have just a text file linked in the show notes. You can hit a machine with screen sharing from a URL. So again, look at the links in the show notes. It's basically vnc:// and then you have the name of the Mac and some modifiers. But what this means is that you can start screen sharing from something like the Stream Deck. So I have this set up now. I've got a button on my Stream Deck and I hit it and it pulls up screen sharing to my Mac Mini. And I had issues with this. Jason says it works, where you can also send your username and password in the URL. I don't have that. Again, I had trouble with that, but I have the username and password saved in Finder. So I just hit the button and then hit sign in. And in the URL, it is encoded that I want high quality and I just want one virtual display. And it's just a really fast way, instead of going to Finder and then going to your network on the sidebar and finding the Mac you need, like having it on the Stream Deck or having it just be a URL away is really pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. It has improved, and I don't really have much to add to that.
Yeah, it's great. And you think, well, I don't have a Mac Mini server. Like, it's also really useful. Like if you just have a family iMac, or the other thing, and we've talked about this before, and I think it'll come up again in our we're getting ready to do an episode about family tech support for the holidays. This is built into Messages as well, so you can share. Hey, Mom's MacBook Air is doing a funny thing. Can I just look at it from my Mac? Like, Apple's done a lot of work here. The Vision Pro, I think, is both the catalyst and the beneficiary of a lot of that work with the virtual Mac display. But if you get Apple Silicon Mac and on both ends, the virtual display and the high quality, like it's pretty sweet.
Anonymous writes in, I recently upgraded from a 14-year-old 27-inch Apple Cinema display. I remember those.
Yeah, they were great.
To a 34-inch ultra-wide display. And I'm still adjusting to all that real estate. I'd love to hear you talk about how you manage windows, where you'd like to place them on the screen, and what apps you use to move windows around.
Yeah, so I'll have in the show notes, about a year ago, we did an episode about this. And I skimmed it. I think it mostly holds up a little over a year later. But I'm using a Better Snap Tool. And there's a bunch of these. You're going to talk about one you like. And I like it because it's just complicated enough for what I need. So my setup is I have a studio display in front of me, and to my left is my MacBook Pro. And on the left, I do 1/3 timery and 2/3 reminders. So I can see my task and my time tracking together. And I can do that with a simple keyboard shortcut. And it just pops right over there. But a lot of these tools also have like presets, and they really start as simple as you want and like move up from there. Some of these are like scriptable. Like, it's wild what some of these developers have done. But I would also say if you're running macOS Sequoia, and you wrote this too, the tools in macOS Sequoia are really pretty good. It's all behind that green window control. You can hover and you can move and resize, or you can fill in a range. So like it moves your active window to the spot you want, and then you can fill in the others. Apple's done a really good job here. And I think for most people, what Apple has done will totally work for you. The reason I'm still using Better Snap Tool is because I want 1/3, 2/3, and that's not an option Apple has. Theirs are all done by halves or quarters. But I would say, honestly, start with what's in Sequoia if you're running Sequoia, and then decide where to go from there.
Yeah, I second the nomination for the Sequoia tools. They're excellent. And if you've not used window management tools, this may be the end of the story for you. A couple tips there. They don't have keyboard shortcuts for all of them listed, but you can add them in the settings keyboard, custom keyboard stuff. We've talked about this on the show before, but you can set a custom keyboard for any command, including window management, because they do show up in the menu bar. And I would recommend, if you're going to use the Sequoia tools, take a good look at the keyboard shortcuts. Consider adding a few of your own if you need it. But for me, Moom remains the king. It's another app that got a new version recently. And just when I was thinking, well, maybe I could get by with just the Sequoia tools, Moom comes out with this killer update. And I'm like, nope, I'm still on Moom. And it's great. As for screen management, I don't have a super wide screen. I have the Apple Pro Display, which is a big display, but it's not widescreen. It's traditional proportion. What I like to do with it is treat it generally as halves. Like a lot of times I've got stuff that are on my screen, my halves. Right now, I'm in the midst of an experiment where I've got Stage Manager turned back on my Mac. And you know what, Stephen? I don't hate it. I'm getting used to it. It's kind of nice being able to switch these setups. And my screen is big enough that giving up a little real estate on the left side of the screen doesn't really cost me that much.
Sure.
But that's another discussion for another day. But so generally I use halves, but I also use custom setups for all sorts of things. An example is, as we podcast, I went ahead and put the screenshot in here. You can put it into the notes. But I do this thing where I've got like the Notion window open on maybe the right 3/5 of the screen, but I also have Safari where it is just slightly offset, like pulled over an inch. And it's an inch on both sides. So if I click on Safari or Notion, I can still see a portion of the other window, if that makes sense. So I can jump between them fairly quickly. Sometimes when we're recording podcasts, I want to check something on the web. So I've got the ability to do that. And it all fits on one giant screen, and I've got my recording tools over on the left side running. So it's, so I can set these up. And I did this in Moom very specifically, and I saved it as a setup in Moom. So before I record, I press one button, and my windows arrange themselves for me. I will say, Anonymous, that window management is really useful. There are Automators episodes where we talked about setups. I really feel strongly that if you want to become more effective at your computer, you set up some of these window management setups. So you push a button and the computer arranges itself in the format that works for the type of work you want to do. And it does allow you to be more focused.
Yeah, it's there's lots of good options out there.
Well, can I add one more point to this though?
Yeah.
Vision Pro Beta. They've got now the widescreen Mac thing. It's pretty nice. I think I'm going to be using my Vision Pro more with my Mac. I mean, I don't know. Have you played with it?
I have not, because it requires the 15.2 beta. I don't run the betas on the Mac once we're out of the summer.
No, I certainly don't too. And there's no way that I'm using it right now.
Okay. Everyone I've talked to, though, who has tried it is impressed. I will say that.
All right.
Including you, apparently.
Yeah, hypothetically. Grace wrote in, David mentioned the Elgato Cam link in the gift guide. What are your full desk camera setups? Grace, I actually wrote her back, and she wants to improve her Zoom game, and she's kind of want to know, well, what do I need, and what are you guys using? So I went ahead and thought about that. My setup is not one I would recommend for most people. I make my living doing videos for the field guides in the lab, so I want to have really nice cameras and setups. But I've got two SLR cameras on my desk. One is mounted on a pole with a Pro Display. It's got this giant stand, and you can actually clamp to it. So I do. I have a pole clamped to the stand with a Sony, older Sony SLR on the top of it with a nice lens with a little bokeh. And that's right over the top of my screen. So it's in the position of a traditional webcam, but it looks way better than a webcam. And like we said in the gift guide, I tried a bunch of like expensive webcams, and none of them could hold a candle to what I do with this one.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy with that. Then I have a separate, my fancy SLR that I use to take family pictures and everything. I've also mounted it on the desk there, and that is on the side of the desk on a pole. It doesn't even point at me as I sit behind my computer. And because the lens on it is really good, but it's too tight for me to be standing at the computer and shoot with it. So I actually push my chair back a bit, and that's for kind of dedicated fancy man shots with the nice background that I have here in the studio. And they're both on quick releases. I use the Ulanzi ones that you get off Amazon, but they lock, but they unlock, and then you can just pop the camera out and then go take a graduation photo or whatever. I've got all of my camera money invested on these cameras on the desk, but they do other stuff. Occasionally, Grace, I have an Elgato prompter, which I don't use 100% of the time, but I use it sometimes. And I think it's actually quite useful for Zoom calls because it allows you to look at the lens and the people at the same time.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a nice touch. I wouldn't use it all the time, though, and just because I don't find I need it. But if you do, that works. And then I think if you're going to set up one of these setups for home and you really want to up your game on Zoom, almost even more than a better camera is just some light. And I've got 2 of those Elgato lights that are tied to Stream Deck knobs where I can turn the lights on to kind of light me up better.
Yeah.
And this is the most frustrating Elgato product I own because sometimes they don't work. I don't know why.
Same. I got mine. I've got 3. I've got one at my desk, and then I have 2 on my overhead table. If you ever seen a picture of anything I've taken straight down, it's on this other table in my office. And yeah, sometimes I just hit the button and nothing happens. And there's an Elgato little like control center Mac app. And sometimes that app just crashes in the background, and that's why they don't work. Other times the app is running and it still doesn't work. It
doesn't see them.
It's been that way forever. And I don't really understand because the rest of their stuff really works well together, but I have the same problem.
Yeah, if I did it over again, I would just buy 2 cheap LED lights and then just reach up and click them on.
Yeah.
I think that would be better.
Or if you wanted to be fancy, like some HomeKit plugs in the wall or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
And then the other thing I would say is if you're doing this and you want to be fancy, consider a USB microphone. I'm not recommending Grace is not trying to do MacSparky Labs and Field Guides. She just wants to make her Zoom calls better. But
yeah,
I do think a lot of times people upgrade the cameras and they don't upgrade the audio. And if your audio is bad, it I don't know, it just sounds weird. And I guess the last point I'd make is consider if you even want to do it. Like when I go on Zoom calls with normal people, it always becomes like a discussion topic. Wow, Dave, you look so good. I love your background image. And I don't even tell them, no, that's actually the room. It's okay.
Yeah. So for me, I had a Sony RX100 I used for a long time. And then I kind of just got to a point where like I wasn't doing as many video calls and it was a bit more fiddly than I wanted. And so I'm actually using an iPhone 12 on a stand and using Camo, which is this just absolutely great app for the iPhone and Mac, and it lets you turn an iPhone into a webcam. And I do use it plugged in, so I got a lightning cable snaking up to the phone. And Mike and Jason over Upgrade turned me onto this, and I'd heard about Camo and I played with it when it came out, but it is it's a great way to get started. So like if you have an old iPhone around, even this iPhone 12 looks way better than the cameras built into my MacBook Pro and Studio, especially the Studio display. And so that works great. And I have it on this mount, and it's been really solid.
Yeah, your solution makes a lot more sense for someone like Grace. If you got an old iPhone around, just put it up there. You're in great shape.
Yeah.
I've gone overboard. This year was the year that I committed to it, though, because I've tried all that stuff. I tried getting like slightly better webcams using the iPhone, but for the kind of stuff I do, I want people are paying. I want it to look really nice, and now that it's all set up, it's really not that difficult of a pain. You just turn it on and you're off to the races.
Yeah. It's what you're doing is different than most people, but it's great. I mean, this is a lot of technology changed. A lot of our use of technology changed through the pandemic, but like good looking Zoom meetings is like top of that list. Like it's pretty easy to do and you can really stand out, especially, compared to a bunch of people who are just like on their laptops and like looking up their nose, a little bit of money can go a long way. And so, let us know, Grace. Let us know how it goes.
It's funny to me, like even when you watch like the news and they interview somebody, like people who like this is the first time they've ever been like interviewed.
Yeah.
And it's like the up the nose angle on the camera. And it's like, really, couldn't you just spend a little bit of money or time, or even just honestly get some dictionaries and put your laptop at your face level?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just shocking to me, these people who like are appearing to the world and do so in such a terrible way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. How about stuff we're playing with? You got anything new and fun to share?
Yeah. In fact, we are in the same lane this time, which is fun. No M4 Max on my desk, but on my break, I was able to upgrade my home internet to fiber. So I've been on Comcast business class as long as I've lived in this house, which is 9 years now, because that was the fastest Comcast I could get Comcast to go. And the download was fine. It's the upload, because on cable internet, they're asymmetric. So you may have, I think I had 800 megabits a second down, but I had like 80 up. And when you do what you and I do for a living, you're mostly like, I'm spending a lot of time uploading big media files, right, to Jim or to other people. And I'd signed up years ago for AT&T, who is the fiber provider in my area. Although there is a new one, Ting is coming to town with fiber. They've been putting fiber all over the place, but they're not, I don't think they're lit up yet. But anyways, on my sabbatical, I got the email and a text and like 5 phone calls, and then a person on my doorstep telling me that AT&T fiber was available on my street. And so I signed up. I've got symmetric gigabit up and down fiber, which is just mind blowing how much better it is than the old business class was. But this did set me down a path, because I had some pretty old Eeros that were just Wi-Fi 6. And I was like, well, I'd like to upgrade the wireless to take like more advantage of the bigger pipe. Even though I'm wired to Ethernet at my desk, it'd be nice to have faster Wi-Fi. Then I was like looking at that, and then I talked to some friends, and I ended up going with a UniFi setup. So I've completely redone my network. All UniFi, a UniFi router, 2 switches, one in the house, one in the studio. I have Ethernet run from the house under a walkway, through my garage, through conduit into the pod cabin out here, my building I work in. And that was a great investment. I did not do it myself. I paid somebody to pull that cable, because I looked at it and was like, this is going to be terrible. And it's all outdoor rated and stuff. So it's been running for like 8 years and has been great. And then 4 of their Wi-Fi 7 access points. And I put all this in about a week ago. And I got to say, it was the easiest networking I think I've ever done. Like the Eeros are great and their app is really good, but the UniFi stuff was so easy to set up. Now you pay for it. This is an expensive setup. It was more than I would have paid for new Eeros, but not that much more. So I kind of felt like, well, it's a little bit more. I can redo everything. The access points are PoE, so they're powered from the Ethernet, which is great. I had a real trouble when I set my Eero network up, that where I needed some of the access points, I didn't have power nearby. And so I was like, had like an extension cord, like running through the back of a closet up to the shelf where the Eero was. Like, it just wasn't ideal. And now they're just powered via the Ethernet cable. And all my Ethernet that I'd run through the house and through the studio, all fine. I have gigabit everywhere in all those ports. And I've been really happy with it. And it's quite good.
Yeah, I am. Okay, so I want to talk about the UniFi in a second, but first let me talk about my speed improvement. And this is kind of funny. We didn't talk about this. It just, we both put similar things in the outline. But I got an email from my local cable provider. We don't have fiber here, at least to my knowledge. And they said, hey, we noticed you like the internet. and we got a deal. If you want to pay a little extra, we can get you to a 2 gigabyte connection, you know? And I said, sure. And so they sent me a new cable modem, in which, you know, there's always a bunch of setup involved with that. And I got it working. And sure enough, I'm getting 2 gigabytes over wire, but I also had the problem where my switches were too slow. You know, I've got some switches in the network where, you know, you take one Ethernet in and 8 come out the other end. And with all the HomeKit stuff I have and the various rooms I have, I've got a couple around the house. So I had to upgrade those. And once I got all that done, I'm getting pretty consistently, you know, 2 gigabyte down. Sometimes a lot more, which I don't think I'm supposed to get. You know, cable internet is weird, you know, and then sometimes it's slower, and sometimes. But the upload is the big difference, because I was getting like, you know, 50 upload, and now I'm getting like 900 upload. You know, close to a gigabyte, not necessarily north of a gigabyte upload, but it is so much better for me for the same reason. You know, I'm sending a lot of media files out to other people, and now it happens lickety split. So that was a big, nice update for me. I kept my Eero 6 network in place. It's Eero 6. Some of them are the Plus devices, and it seems like it's fast enough for Wi-Fi. I was just running some tests as you were talking, and I'm not getting north of a gigabyte off those. I'm getting like 500 to 800 peak. I think at some point I may follow you down the rabbit hole of the UniFi system, because like power over Ethernet is a big selling point for me as well, for a variety of reasons. But I've spent enough money this year.
Yeah. This was an investment, and I looked at their Wi-Fi 6 versus their their AP6 versus their AP7, their access points, and I was like, you know what? I really just kind of want to do this once and be done with this for like 5 to 10 years. And what's cool about the UniFi stuff is that it's all very modular, and so if I need to put a bigger switch in somewhere, or like actually my Eero network was 5 access points, because my house, I've explained this before, my house is an L shape. And then the studio is in the far corner of the backyard, kind of diagonal to the open side of the L. So like from a Wi-Fi perspective, I got a really bad situation. And my house was built in the early 50s, and like stuff just doesn't go through these walls very well.
Yeah.
And so I actually bought 5 access points and just put one every place I had in Eero. And in their dashboard, UniFi will it will tell you like, actually, you've got a lot of overlap here. And so I actually unplugged one of the access points, and I think the network is performing better actually without it. And I just unplugged it, and it just dropped off the dashboard to the bottom. It says offline. But if I want to update any of this in the future or expand it, like one thing they have their own security cameras, and you can run like your own DVR locally. And I could just add that to this network if I wanted to. And in fact, the gateway I went with is the Cloud Gateway Ultra. They have a version of that you can put an SSD in and run those cameras right to the gateway. And I was like, I don't want to do that right now. I'm pretty happy with my Ring setup. But if I want to go that way in the future, it's all kind of plug and play and like build your own system, and all works together. And you can manage it from the web or an app on your phone. And, you know, I'm definitely have only scratched the surface of like, it's really pretty nerdy, some of the things you can do with it. Like you can do really interesting things with routing and VLANs. Like I know I was reading online, a lot of people put all their smart home stuff like on a separate VLAN, so that traffic is like separate from your main internet traffic. I haven't done any of that, but it's all available to me. And the community around this is so big. Like lots of people have documented lots of things, including the fact that like my AT&T router, which is still in place, there's like some weirdness in the settings of that router you need to get right for like maximum performance on the UniFi side. But I just like found a blog post someone had written about it, followed his steps, and it like lit up like super easy. So I've been really happy with it so far. And like I said, I wanted to do something that was going to be set for a long time. Like those Eeros I think it's been in place like 7 years or something. That was a long time. I don't want to, my network is not something that I want to deal with on an ongoing basis, right? Like I kind of want to set it up and forget it. And then every so often upgrade. And I feel like I've got lots of runway now.
Did you get them from Ubiquiti or did you like Amazon them?
From Ubiquiti. And it was one of those things. Marco Arment helped me pick some of the stuff out because he's had experience with it. And I sent him a screenshot. I did not pay for the fast shipping, but they ship from Memphis. And in fact, I think the founder and owner of Ubiquiti, I think that's his title. He's an owner of our NBA team. But they ship their stuff from here. And so even though I didn't pay for fast shipping, I got it the next day. I was like, this is awesome. Like, let's go. And the support's really good. So I got like a 5-year warranty on it. It's going to be nice.
Well, maybe next year. Let's see how things go in MacSparky land.
Yeah.
But I definitely am interested in this. Maybe we'll do a networking show and then you'll enable me to spend more money, but not now.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at even the control panel looks really nice.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Well, another feedback show in the can. If you'd like to send us feedback, we've got a forum right over on the website at relay.fm/MPU. We'd love to hear from you. You can also sign up for membership for more power users there, where you get the ad-free extended version of the show. Today, we're going to be talking about the underside of my desk. Very exciting project I'm on. Just the kind of thing that pushes my buttons, Stephen. Thank you to our sponsors, Squarespace and 1Password. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time.